A lot of people call this the psychopathology unit, the abnormal unit, the mental disorders unit. There's a lot of different ways that we could introduce this thing. So there's no way in the world we can introduce psychopathology into a week, into 8 days or 9 days, however long we budgeted. But let's introduce it this way. Is there anyone here? Of course, ideally you're going to raise your hand, but maybe you haven't. Is there anyone here who has ever seen legitimate crazy behavior? I'm not talking about your mom mad because you didn't clean the dishes, but I'm talking about someone who's just nuts. That's a great question. What do you mean by crazy? I mean, kind of like art. Well, I don't know how to define it, but I know what it is when I see it. It's hard for us to define this is crazy and that's not, and that's actually the theme of today's lesson is how do we define it. But is there anyone who knows, oh, you're almost disturbed, it was so disturbingly weird. Once again, though, notice that you were disturbed. You are a person of a certain age, a certain gender, a certain culture, certain experiences. You saw something that did not fit into your schema. But the idea is your schema the one to decide? If you say, no, I'm only a teenager, I get it, I've never really, you guys might not, maybe I haven't been outside of the world, I don't know, maybe I'm pretty sheltered, maybe you're pretty sheltered. We don't know what's normal and what's not. So who does? Which goes back to your question. This is going to be the theme of, we've got this thing called abnormality. We've got suffering, we've got mental illness, and like Wilhelm Wundt, we want to find out what makes it, what makes up mental illness. We know what makes up chemistry. We've got a periodic table of elements. We can easily define things into boxes and assign them values and weights. Can we do that with mental illness? We're going to try. If you look at a little quote by Melville, it says, who in the rainbow can draw the line where violet ends and orange tint begins? Distinctly we see the difference of the colors, but where exactly does the one first blendly enter into the other? So with sanity and insanity. Is there anyone here who might admit that you have maybe once or twice or a couple of times in your life crossed the line, crossed that hard to name line and did something you knew was pathologically mentally ill? Before you raise your hand, and I got to be careful about this, there's several rhetorical questions I might want to throw out. To ask you guys to kind of link you to the lesson. Have you ever, reference what your behavior is? But this unit's a little different because we do talk about sensitive stuff. And maybe, just maybe, we have to ask, why is it so sensitive? You and I both know, you see some kid walk in the hall, they got crutches. We're like, oh, you got crutches? They have streamers and blinking lights on their crutches. Everyone signs their cast. But if you or someone you know is suffering from mental illness, it's a secret. Don't tell anyone. It's embarrassing. It's humiliating. So I don't want you to ever really disclose anything that you're not ready to disclose. Share with the class, so be careful of that. But in the end, if I go back to my other question, and I say, is there anyone here who's ever done anything pathologically mentally ill? I would bet everyone in this class in their life has done something. Statistically, most of you have gotten drunk and or high. You're not supposed to giggle. People are like, yeah. All right, then, looking back fondly. All right, that's wrong. And I'll tell you why. Because while it might be normal, statistically, most people in the United States do get intoxicated regularly. That's a normal statistical behavior, mean, median, and mode. That does not mean it's healthy. And the question you have to ask yourself is why? Why would you want to change your consciousness so that you change your reality? What about your first reality is so bad you want to change it? You think that's healthy? Has anyone here ever lashed out at your mom for no reason whatsoever? The person you love the most, you're supposed to love the most, you kirk out and just freaking say something mean. Well played. According to Freud, there is a reason. Oh, so now we're using Freud. We don't want the penis envy thing, but when it's convenient. All right, fair enough. All right, so let's jump into this thing. What is abnormal? That is, of course, the big question. All right, second only to, if you're going the speed of light and you turn your headlights on, what happens? So what are we talking about? We talk about abnormal psychology. What is abnormal? You get, like anything else in psychology, hard to define, all right, but easier to talk about, easier to describe. Whenever I talk to this unit, whether it's in this school or at different campuses where I teach or where they're dumb enough to think I know what I'm talking about, and I introduce this unit, and it's almost like clockwork. Someone will sheepishly come up to me or send me an email, all right, and they say, Dr. Swope, I think I have this thing, all right? And then I'm like, okay. And my biggest question is simply this. Are you suffering? Everyone's got weirdness. And I suspect if everyone's got it, then being weird by definition is normal. Last semester, kids like, Dr. Swope, I have this really weird thing. When I touch something with one hand, I have to touch it with another. People are like, yeah, I got that. All right, some people are all weird. They will not, or they'll do anything they can to prevent using a public restroom. They got that pee so bad their eyes turn yellow. That's how much pee they got. I know, ew, that's not cool. But they will not use a public restroom. Is that weird? A lot of people have issues in public restrooms. Who brings a marker into the stall? I don't understand that. So going back to this idea is, are you suffering or is it just weird? You're going to be surprised. Maybe, just maybe, next week I'll set up an anonymous survey on the website. Do not log in, but I'll open it to guest access. And we'll have about 10 questions, and then I'll print out the results. And you'll see how common this is. So therefore, if it's common, is it abnormal? The interesting thing, if weirdness is common, does it cause you suffering? Now, if it doesn't cause a person suffering, maybe an addict. If an addict has a pretty good supply of the thing that gives them pleasure, whether it's meth or alcohol or coke or whatever else, they're not suffering. They're temporarily happy. What if someone who is anorexic is then saying, no, I'm fine, I don't have a problem, I'm fine? Notice the family's suffering. Someone who's so delusional on a psychotic break, they don't know that they're suffering. So we got suffering. Is the person suffering? Are their loved ones suffering? And that's probably the most important. By the way, star that. But just because you're suffering doesn't mean you're mentally ill. If your favorite dog just had a horrible blender accident and lost an ear, I know, oh, that's sad. That suffering is normal and that suffering is appropriate. Maladaptiveness, not being able to function. It always scares me when I say the word function and structuralism. Functionalism and structuralism. Say them 10 times fast. No, don't. Don't. You'll get the joke. Not being able to function. Now, if this is a group of adolescents, I swear to you, not 10 minutes ago, I was having a conversation with another teacher, and they're like, what is wrong with that kid? Why won't that kid do work? And my answer was, teenage boy. Is it normal for a teenage boy not to do a lot of homework? I'm not saying it's good, but is it normal? Are teenage boys supposed to do all of their homework? Are teenage girls supposed to do all their homework? How do we define what level of functioning there is? Irrationality. This one's probably the second most important, because if you're not rational, then we got a problem. Not rational, then we got a problem. Now, to some extent, all human beings are not rational. Skinner is going to say, if you punish someone and reward someone, you can shape behavior. But most of the time, or a lot of the time, we don't respond to that. We seek out things that are ultimately bad for us. Economists will oftentimes say, if you present two choices, and you have a rational consumer, the rational consumer will choose the cheaper choice. Yet I'm looking around, I see a lot of people Starbucks. Why are you spending $5 on a cup of coffee? McDonald's has it for $1. Yet we go to Starbucks. Why? So maybe all of us aren't perfectly rational, but I'm talking really irrational. Basically crazy. You're not in reality. Did y'all see the news story about the woman who drove her car into the waves with the kids in it? Yeah. You're like, how? Why? We can't. There's no Rosetta Stone. There's no translation necessarily between rational, which is us. Now, immediately, all of you should shoot your hands up. Like, well, how do you know we're rational? Maybe it's assumption. Irrationality, incomprehensibility means you can't understand them, they can't understand you. Talk the McNaughton rule. The McNaughton rule is not necessarily psychological, it's more legal. Just recently, the dude who shot up, but I forget his name, shot the Colorado Theater as the Joker. Remember a couple years ago? All right. His defense team answered a plea of insanity. I would think he is insane. But be aware of this. The McNaughton rule is legal, and it basically means, is the person too crazy to understand what they were doing, understand it causes harm, understand the consequences? Very, very, very rarely is a defense of insanity used. You know why? Because it doesn't work. But your average person, John Q. Public, Sally Jane Smith, whatever, the average person, what do we know of mental illness? It's kept quiet. We don't know how common it is. Should we blame someone for getting mentally ill? Should we excuse them? Someone who shoots up a theater, is it their fault? If so, do we put them in prison? That's not going to help them. We got a lot of unanswered questions. We have a lot of unasked questions about mental illness. The McNaughton rule basically means is someone too crazy to stand trial, and if they're not too crazy, if they're too crazy to stand trial, then what? We can't let them go. We put them in a hospital. All I'm saying is that legal has a definition of craziness here. Psychology has a definition of craziness over here. And oftentimes they overlap, sometimes they don't. Unpredictable and loss of control. I'm looking in your faces and I see fear, I see worry, I see hopelessness. It's not right. But the reality is, I don't think anyone here is really, really nervous that all of a sudden you're going to jump up, flap your arms and say tweet, tweet, and run around the room. Never crossed your mind. You're not like, oh God, don't let it happen, don't let it happen, don't let it happen. Why? Because you can control yourself. If you couldn't control yourself, then maybe, just maybe, that is one possible piece of the puzzle of craziness. Notice it's not like you have to have all of these. Suffering by itself might not be enough, but suffering plus unpredictability. So this is kind of a work in progress. It's hard to nail this down. We want it to be an algorithm. We want it to be if this, then this. Observer discomfort. Years ago, there was have you ever noticed in this school or in other high schools where periodically they ring the bell early, or they hold classes late, or they'll close off a hallway? Anyone know what I'm talking about? And the reality is because someone's struggling, someone's having a problem, either a student. Look, you get enough students in any given school, you get enough staff members in any given school, a small percentage of them are going to periodically struggle. Maybe they have a break, maybe they snap, maybe something in the brain. So a memorable one happened several years ago. This kid, I wasn't there. I was eventually called, but I don't know exactly what happened in the classroom. Kid just snapped. Flipped the desk over, F you, hate you. And the teacher's like, teacher wasn't even talking to the kid. It's like the kid wasn't even in reality. So the rest of the kids were like, what the? Moved away. Kid ran out in the room, but like not even purposeful action. Security was called. Principal was called, and for some reason they think I know what I'm doing, so they called me. As if, right? What am I going to do? So I get there, and in my professional opinion, like, hey, he's crazy. I know. Seriously, the kid was suffering. So what do? Now, one of the security guards is like, just tackle him. I'm like, whoa, hold on. You got a child who's suffering, who's not in the reality. The last thing we want to do is add stress. We don't want to risk physical injury. And notice the security guard thought of that kid as an it. One of them. He's crazy. Let's get him. I'm like, dude, he's a human being. You wouldn't do that to someone who's suffering physically. So we're trying to talk them down. And you don't want to crowd their space, so we're trying to de-escalate, chill. All right? And then so before any of us could do anything, on a corner of where two cinder block walls come together, we're sitting there talking, out of nowhere, a kid goes, bam! Puts his forehead right on the corner of the brick. And you heard it, bone on brick. Immediately, skull just pouring blood. And the rest of us were like, what? That was so unexpected. Before we could either grab him again, already he opened it up, just did it again. Self-punishment. I mean, he like launched himself. You could see the skull, just pouring. Stop. I made that story up. How many of you are really mad at me, right? All right. So I was saying that. I was looking at all of your faces. And all of you except for one kid was really, really disturbed. Remember what Ekman said? Your facial expression is directly and neurologically tied to your emotions. You could not hide how disturbed you were. All of you were disturbed except for the one kid who I think you should go to the counselor now. Because the kid was like, all right, the kid's like, tell me more. All right, so the point we have here is, that is my point. If you were really disturbed by that self-injurious, irrational behavior, good. That means that behavior, if we get a bunch of people that said, that's not right. I don't know what the line is between right and wrong, but that was clearly not right. I think that is a piece of the puzzle. Observer discomfort. Statistical infrequency. Well, we know from last unit that genius is statistically infrequent. Being a millionaire is statistically infrequent. Winning the gold medal, statistically infrequent. It doesn't mean it's bad. But if it's really rare, you got to raise an eyebrow, put a little flag next to the check mark. I don't know what the exact formula is, and if you asked 100 psychiatrists, you asked 100 clinical psychologists, I think you might have a slightly different take on how this all fits together. Violation of moral and ideal standards. It is not okay to harm children. Some of you are like, well, why do you do it? No, I'm kidding. You guys aren't even kids. You don't count. You're what I call the soulless. All right? If it's not okay to harm a child, let me ask you this. 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, I don't judge whenever you have your kid. And I know that, let's hope, there's no parent in the world that goes into parenthood saying, yeah, now I have my own kid to abuse. That's kind of freaky. But imagine, just imagine, so you're walking out of Walmart. You see some mom kirking out on her kid, side door of the minivan's open, and she's like, I told you, and I told you what's going to happen. And she hits her kid. Is that mental illness? Connotative norms, kind of similar to what you said, based on society. Check this out. Anorexia only exists in a few places. The United States, Great Britain, maybe Germany, Netherlands. It's hard to find anorexia below the equator. That's crazy. So does that mean it's not genetic? I mean, theoretically, if we're all the same species, wouldn't it have statistical representation that anorexia would fall normally across all cultures? And the answer is no. Anorexia is a uniquely Western, European, American concept. Look, it used to be the idea that psychology, some people say it's an old science stretching back over a century, but compared to, I don't know, chemistry, mathematics, astronomy, psychology is really, really new. Compared to computer science, it's really, really young. The idea was psychology to some extent, and the treatment of psychological disorders was bipolar. There's an implied pun in there, but that's not where we're going. The idea is ill and not ill. And the idea is you get someone from illness to not ill. Notice, of course, we have a lot of implied questions there of the idea of who makes this line. Why is this line here? Is it different for males, females, age groups? Okay, so we got that. And for the longest time, psychologists say, take a pill and that will help you get here. Go to therapy, that will help you get here. Recently, people say that's not good enough. It's not good enough to simply not be ill. Don't we want something more? So let's make another thing. Let's put healthy. Let's put happy. I think we would be remiss if we only talked about ill versus not ill. And if that's all you get is to be not sick, that's a pretty crappy way to be. So how do you become healthy, happy, more charitable, more at peace with yourself, more in tune with your loved ones around you? And we call that branch of psychology positive psychology. When we talk about positive psychology, I mean, it has its roots in humanism. How do we get each person to be as good as they can be? Do you need a life coach? I mean, if you think about it, who would you imagine as a multi-dimensional role model? Physically, they're healthy. Emotionally, they're healthy. Career-wise, interpersonally, spiritually. Who do you think has it all? Who do you think's healthy? I wonder if our society has any role models. Closest one would maybe be Oprah. Optimus Prime. Who do you got? Who said Beyonce? Oh my God. I need help. One of the elements of being the best you can do, we call it optimal living, maybe positive psychology, is you got to have a positive attitude yourself. If you look at yourself critically, like, oh my God, I am average. I'm not even good at this. I'm not good at that. I'm not good at that. That just might be a symptom of illness. Growth and development. I'm looking at a bunch of you guys, 17 years old, you got your whole life in front of you. And I wonder, is there anyone here like, no way, I don't want that. I've reached perfection right now. 17, living with my folks, taking some high school classes. For some people, prom is the highlight of their life. That would be sad. So the question we have, everyone here wants to grow, wants to develop. Are you looking at college? I can't wait to get there. That's healthy. That's normal. If you're looking at college in the future as, what's going on? That's scary. I don't like change. And there are some illnesses and diseases that maybe don't like change. OCD. People who are pretty far down the autism spectrum disorder. Change, they don't like change. Autonomy. Independence. Maybe, just maybe, you're the kind of kid your parents really care about your schoolwork. Ultimately, is it because they love you or because they're trying to relive their own failures through you? So do you have anyone got parents that are like, have you done your work? You're not spending a lot of time on homework recently. I'm a little worried. You're like, Mom, I got this. Does it really irritate you when your mom starts to get like, Mom, look, I've demonstrated stuff so far. I don't think I need your involvement now. But your mom still pokes. Does she bother you? If that bothers you, I think that's healthy. We want to be left alone. Believe it or not, the happiest people at work are not the richest people. They're the people who can do their job in their own way. Work's a fact of life, but if you can do your job and not be bothered, that's pretty good stuff. So autonomy. Accurate perception of reality. See the world as it really is. So what does that mean? Whose perception is accurate? You know, again, I think we could probably compare it to a statistical norm. If you're looking, if someone shows you, I don't know, it's like, oh my God, I got the funniest YouTube video ever. And it's like a toddler falling down the stairs and crying. And they're laughing and you're like, dude, all right. They might not have an accurate perception of reality. Walk away slowly from that person. Environmental competence, when in Rome. Some of you in this class, you might be prom king, prom queen. You might be the coolest person in this school. When you get to University of Schmidlappville, are you going to adjust your style? Are you going, no way, what was cool in high school, that's cool forever. If you cannot adapt to a new social situation, you might be strutting. How many of you all would be embarrassed if your parents saw how you acted at school? How many of you all, when it came time for prom, what if your parents did actually have a webcam at prom and they saw how you were dancing with someone? You're like, oh. When I was growing up, we had to dance like this. All right, so God could see between you. So there's no sins. All right then. Positive interpersonal relationships. Nobody can be healthy by themselves. Nobody can be healthy by themselves. You've got to have a strong social network. I'm not saying you don't squabble with your brother, sister, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever else. And maybe every now and then disagreements and arguments are actually good. They're healthy. They're opportunities to change and readjust. But baby, if you go home and your mom comes in the door, you come in the door, you see your mom, you see your brother, and you like armor up because it's go time every single day, you're anticipating an argument, that's not healthy. Some of you are like, uh-oh, looking guilty. Similar to the idea of when in Rome, the vocabulary word called adaptation. Adaptation, you change to fit the circumstances. Let's say miraculously you fool a college into accepting you. You lied really well on your resume, your application. You paid off a couple teachers to lie on your college recommendation, and so they let you in. And then you got to struggle with your roommate. Your roommate's the exact opposite of you. You're Elsa, she's Anna. It's a mess. So the reality is this. What do? Do you adapt to your roommate? Like, well, that's just the way it is. You know, I'll go when she's coming and we'll do this and we'll do that. She's messy, I'm clean, or vice versa. Or do you try to change the situation? Do you try to adjust? Do you go to your RA? Do you go to the housing department and say, can I get a new room? Can I get a new roommate? Do you try to change that person's behavior? These next two words you're not allowed to write down. Slam your pens down in teenage frustration. Thank you. Some of you are like, no way, I'm a teen rebel, and you didn't slam it down. You're looking at me like this. All right. So here's why I don't want you to write these down. I don't like these words. So check it out. The word vulnerability and resiliency, to me, it implies weakness. It implies someone who has depression, you're like, oh, what, you couldn't handle it? Someone who has PTSD, like, everyone's got trauma, deal with it. I think that's wrong. I think that's archaic. I think that's mean. I think that's ignorant. You don't look at someone who has a physical disease, who has diabetes, like, oh, what, can't handle a little sugar? I know. If you're like, oh, I know. That's disturbing. And if that disturbs you, it shows you that our society applies two different standards, physical illness and mental illness. You don't look at someone who gets flu, who gets some kind of scary word that ends in noma. No one wants a disease that ends in oma. That's bad news. So check it out. You see someone that has cancer, you have sympathy. You don't assume, oh, you're vulnerable, you're not resilient, you couldn't resist it. No, that's mean, that's cruel. Yet in our society, I'm not saying you, but maybe you see reflections of yourself in this. You see someone has mental illness, you're like, what's wrong with you? We all have stress. We all get depressed. Deal with it. Pick yourself up. That's wrong. That's ignorant. And I think these labels show it. Unfortunately, our vocabulary words, so you do need to write down vulnerability. How likely are we to respond maladaptively to stress, to struggle, to strife and turmoil? We all have that. And I'm not saying we're all perfect. Sometimes you get overwhelmed, and what do? You go home. How many of y'all ever had a whole bunch of crap? You have a bad day, you go home, and you do nothing. You just shut down, like, I ain't doing it. You know that's unhealthy, or is it? Maybe for a day, you got to do that. You do it for a week or two, now we got a problem. Okay, so avoiding stress is a maladaptive reaction. Short term, fine. Go home, do nothing, chill. All right, resiliency, the ability to function effectively in the face of adversity, in the face of turmoil, stress, struggle, meanness. Let me ask you this. Imagine, fast forward however many years, months, or whatever, maybe in college, grad school, wherever else, you see someone on the sidewalk and they are fine looking. You're like, You got a whole bunch of dirty thoughts and you look all guilty. Now the question is, they happen to have a crutch. They happen to have, a broken foot. If they have a broken foot, is that going to lead you into thinking, I'm not going out with them. They're flawed. Their bones are weak. No. All right, because they'll heal and they'll look better, even better. Now, let's do this. Imagine you have a similar situation. You're on a sidewalk, someone on campus, they're hot, they're cute, you make eye contact, they make eye contact. All right, and they're like, and you talk, and like you get the digits, you get the numbers, and you're about to walk, and they're like, should I call you? You're like, maybe, and then Carly Rae, and you don't even know what's going on. All right, so isn't that the Carly Rae Jepsen song? Call Me Maybe? I tried to make a teen reference pop song, and you guys got nothing. I did the Anna, the Elsa, the Carly Rae. All right, so here's what we're looking at. If someone's like, yeah, okay, so you got a connection, you're all excited, you can't wait to tell all your friends, put it on whatever, Facebook, tweet it, whatever, and it's like, oh wait, I can't meet with you tomorrow. I got to go see my therapist. Be honest. Are you like, whoa, is that a deal breaker? You shouldn't admit it is, but I bet most people in this class are like, whoa, I'm not going to date someone who's got mental illness. All right, look, here's the deal with coping. The question you want to ask, there's an embedded nature-nurture question. Are we born with it? Is Lady Gaga right? Second reference, you with me on that? Pop music. Baby's temperament. Are some babies just better at handling stress? Or are you taught it? Maybe you got a mom or a dad that's super uptight. What do they do when you spill the milk? Are they all over you? Or like, what'd you do? Oh my God, you're going to ruin this. You wasted milk. Or like, nah. So do we learn these skills, these coping skills, or is that just how we are? Of course, we know it's going to be the mix of both. All right, skip a line, write the word diagnosis. But don't write down the definition. I think you know what it is. If this, then this. This is how we make decisions. In doctors' world, medical doctors, that's true. If the strep culture comes back positive, give antibiotics. If there's a crack in the x-ray, set the bone, put a cast on it, come back in 2 weeks. But that's a medical model. Can we do the same with depression? We do the same in depression in different cultures. What if you got a kid with ADHD, whatever that is, in a traditionally strict classroom that's really, let's face it, boring, like this one? Or you have a kid with ADHD, but they're in a different, more free class and the symptoms don't show up. The assumption here is, do we diagnose based on algorithm? Is the algorithm flexible? Is it based on someone's opinion? Is it based on culture? So how do we diagnose this is ill, this is not? And that's our implied. It's a tough question, and there's a lot of problems with it, but not so many problems to say the whole system's wrong. The system works, just not perfectly. Bags on. You don't think it's going to help the ugly kids? Will it help those around the ugly kids? Yes.